Welcome back for the fourth and final season of Beyond the Venue podcast. When I started this project almost 4 years ago, I had absolutely no idea that I would be the one navigating beyond the venue by returning to the classroom. Before diving into my second year as a doctoral student, I figured it was a great time to wrap up this podcast by offering my listeners a variety of perspectives and experiences of life in academia. This semester, you'll be hearing from my friends, colleagues, classmates, and more, all of whom I've had the pleasure of working with since my return to Temple University a few years ago. Let's hear from them now. My guest today is my friend, Katherine J. Burke, the math queen herself, who I'm super stoked she actually had time to do this podcast recording. We're going to get into it for a hot minute later on in the episode. But Katherine, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm outstanding. I minus the spike of pollen creating the allergies. Luckily, allergies, not COVID, as the test would show last week. So Katherine is
Oh
yet
yeah.
another one of my friends from Temple University, also a doctoral student in the College of Education and Human Development. So we had our first class together when I took Quant 1 non-matriculated.
Yep.
And I know Katherine provided a lot of tutoring and support to some of our fellow classmates because you'll hear more about her backstory because she is the queen and very passionate about math.
At the very least,
Um,
I'm very passionate about math. I don't know about the queen, but
I
passionate for
think you're the
sure.
queen. You are as far as the College of Education is concerned. So Katherine, give our audience a backstory of how you ended up in the College of Ed as a PhD student.
Yeah, so this kind of goes back to maybe I say back to the beginning. My I come from a family of educators. My mom went to college for education. She didn't do it right out of college, but then she eventually became a fourth grade teacher, moved up to sixth grade, focused on being a math teacher, and then now she's an instructional coach at the middle school. My grandma was a early education teacher where she did like kindergartners through like third grade, I think she did. So I've always really respected the profession of teaching, and I always knew in college, like in some way, I wanted to be involved with teaching. I just wasn't sure in what form. And then I kind of started playing with the idea of teaching college. I think that kind of came from having seen my mom teach and seeing my mom work with elementary school students and middle schoolers and being like, this isn't really my jam. Like elementary school students, middle school students, I'm like, not for me. But I really liked working with college students when I worked as a tutor or as a teaching assistant in college. So I was like, okay, let's go to grad school to be a instructor or professor at the college level. And through no fault of my math advisors in college, but when I asked them what I should do to pursue this profession, they said, "Oh, if you want to teach in college, go get a PhD in math." And so off I went to get a PhD in math. I did a post-bac year at Smith, and then I entered into the Temple math department to pursue a PhD in math. And in hindsight, I would say within the first week of being in the math program, through no fault of Temple's math program, I realized it wasn't for me.
Mhm.
I was not there to be a mathematician. I was there to be an educator. And again, not specific to Temple's math department, but just how math programs work. It's typically the focus is being a math researcher, not a math educator. So I really pushed through trying to pursue this dream because I still at the very end wanted to be a college math instructor. But after I took my qualifying exams in that program, I was like, this is really not working out for me. And so I really just I in one of probably the biggest decisions of my life, I decided to leave that program. Luckily, I was able to leave with my master's, and I really enjoyed my time in that program. But it really helped me realize that I need to be focusing on education, not on math. So I applied to programs for education, which I was applying in the fall of 2020. So the fall of the pandemic. I can't remember the state of education at that point, but we were
Not
still
great.
very, yes, we were still very much feeling the repercussions of COVID. And so Temple's program, which was pretty much my top choice, I was still very hopeful to be in the Philly area. Like I think I only applied to Philadelphia schools. My now husband just moved in with me, so we were like, yeah, we kind of got to make Philly work, which we really like. Um, so I applied to Temple, and then I got the news that Temple wasn't accepting students for admission into their program in the fall of 21. So I was like, okay, let's go to Plan C. All good with moving through plans. So moving to Plan C, I adjuncted for a year in 21, 22, and I loved it. It really affirmed for me that like I did want to be teaching in the college setting. Um, and I really was committed to pursuing that career. And so in the fall of 21, I again applied for programs and I got in Temple's program and kind of the rest is history. I've loved my time in the Temple education department, and I'm really thankful to have been able to maintain my relationships in the math department, which has really helped me with my research and my thinking and kind of pursuing my research, but also thinking about what I want to do in the future.
That's awesome. And the timeline now makes a lot of sense in my head as well,
Yeah.
as far as like our overlap goes.
hmm
Because I know you had talked about being an adjunct, but like when you're a full-time PhD student, you can no longer adjunct. Like if you're
Yeah.
teaching, it's because you're doing it for either class credit or to get paid
hmm
as a teaching assistant. So yeah, and that's very funny that adjuncting solidified like I really want to be here, and I had that exact same experience as well.
Yeah.
But also I needed that added bonus of taking those non-matriculated classes to be like, can I go back in a classroom after like 12 years?
Yeah. And that is
Um,
such a fair question. And like, kind of to that point of like being in the classroom and how that is like so different from being in the workforce, so different from just so many other things. There's a running joke with everyone in my life that like I have I've only ever really been a student. Like I've taught and I really enjoy it and like that's what I want to do. But like I calculated it and like I did pre-K. So I've done like 25 out of my 29 years of life have been as a student. And one of those other years, so 26 years I've been in school out of 29. So like I really love school and I always joke that at this point I feel like at the very least I should have a PhD in being a student. Um, but yeah, I have a very long history in education. I really like it.
Well, I think, I mean, if anything, I guess that helps you be a more empathetic teacher as well. Of you've been
I
a
definitely
student
think
for so
so.
long that you are not very far removed from that classroom experience. So,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
so you just finished up with your coursework at the end of this past spring semester. So you and I have had classes together for the last year and a half. So my first full-time semester would have been your, I guess, like third full-time semester. We went
Yeah,
back in the fall. And
yeah.
so we had two classes together. We had Quant 2, which
hmm
it's like, okay, we got through Quant 1, same professor, same. It was very like similar with the class. It was almost like everybody stuck around. So you had your crew, you knew, the group texting and
hmm
group emails and making sure everyone's okay. Kind of your battle buddies. And then there were only 7 of us in motivation and education. And it
I also just remembered we also had cognition together.
we did.
And
Okay,
I
so that was
knew
the
there was another
spring.
class we had, and I was like, what class was that? And it was cognition,
So
who
we've
was
had a
also
class
with the same
together,
professor.
like, so in the 4 years that I've been taking, or 4 years, in the 4 semesters that I have taken coursework at Temple and this program, only qualitative was the only class I didn't have with you. I feel like we've been together like every
Yeah,
so what the hell am I gonna do in the fall? No. I will miss having classes with you.
I know. I'm gonna miss having classes and like seeing everyone because I
Yes.
won't see people anymore unless I
It's
leave
going to
my
be a
house,
very
which
different
yeah.
shift for sure for you. So when we had motivation education together, there were only 7 of us, and there were the 3 kind of math teachers on one side of the room. There was me, the lone educational psychologist, which motivation education, like that's what ed psych is all about. Then we had our two awesome like art graduate students who were learning, are very interested in studying art education.
Yeah.
And then uh um uh
Caitlin.
Caitlin, thank
Caitlin.
you. Who
Yeah.
and what's Caitlin's specialty again? Which I think was she the like the data
I think so.
like that, I forget like whatever like Tom's done and like the whole, it is not, I know that it's not my jam. It's some sort of
Yeah. Sidebar, like I had two classes, like that was my second class with her, and like I could never retain what she did. I remember that she played the flute. Like that was like her hobby and like she was very musical, but I couldn't ever remember what she did in the program.
yeah, that's because
So,
then I think too, like if it's not kind of like a part of your identity, or if it's not something that you're kind of like bringing it up or referencing a lot. And
exactly.
so I think for me, like I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people thought I was just like a hospitality major that like snuck into the College of Ed, because that's my lived experience. And so I can
Yeah,
talk about my experiences as an adjunct in the College of Education, but a huge chunk of my like lived experience is going to be hospitality. So I
definitely.
was very comforted by the fact that we were all so diverse and just had a very eclectic grouping of perspectives. And
Definitely.
so I did not feel like out of place because everyone just had their unique perspectives. So
Definitely.
and also it was very funny that I feel like you and Tyler just like knew your theories, that for me, like I was learning about like a lot of these there are so many motivational theories and they all just like build on another
It's
one.
wild.
And it
Yeah,
was very much like, what the hell did I get myself into? Like, is this what I'm doing? Like all of these theories, and they have gotten more interesting as the year has progressed. Um, but you and Tyler could just like reference them left and right, and Bandura and self-efficacy and all this. And I was very impressed.
that was honestly like I thank you for saying that, but I also think it was very um like the stars aligned. I can't think of a better way to phrase it. Like kind of the stars aligned where my comfortability using theory and like talking about theory very much emerged in that semester. Like
Okay.
if you had talked to me like 5 weeks prior to the start of that semester, I would have been like, I don't like talking theory. Like I would have put myself on the opposite end of the spectrum from Lindsay, who like can talk on and on about theory, whereas like that was not me. I feel better about it and it's definitely a developing thing, but I think it had to do with a combination of like what I was teaching because I was teaching or I was adjuncting, no, sorry,
Teaching
teaching
assistanting.
assistanting early childhood education, and we didn't like deeply talk about theories, but I had to talk about like Bandura and Vygotsky enough so that I had to be able to like take what I knew about those and learn a little bit more about them to teach them and teach it to students. So I was like, oh, I get this now, like kind of putting into that perspective. But then also, I think I kind of got like the I don't know,
It was like
the
a crash
swagger of
course almost
being
like right before.
yeah. But then also like having a bit of like the swagger of a second year student being like, okay, I gotta start owning this.
Yeah.
Like I got my feet wet. I like feel good about where I am, what I'm doing in my first year, and then like now I really gotta like pedal to the metal, really like put it into action. So it was definitely just the confluence of events that led me to be the theory person you saw.
Well then, yeah, so then we had cognition and learning in the this past spring,
I don't remember that
and
class.
I feel like it was, there was a lot of like overlap of like a lot of the theories we had learned in motivation education. And so the material itself is just very dry, but
Very
we did
dry.
have the benefit of like having our quant professor again. So like we know exactly how he operates. It was a very
Definitely.
similar kind of like flow and function.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And again, like a smaller class. So like very supportive of one another. And I always cracked it up because what do you call it? Your SMET squad, the SMET girls,
I, I call them my sped gals.
sped. We're SMET, they're
Yeah, my sped
sped.
gals. Yeah.
So can
Yes.
you explain? So our listeners have been hearing plenty of acronyms. over the last couple
Hmm.
episodes. So SMET and SPED and like how you all became friends and how they became your
Yeah.
SPED girls.
Yeah. So, first to say, I'm sure the listeners are saying, MG, Catherine, you're talking about SMET, but the acronym is STEM. And guys, just so you know, that is my reaction. I always get like a sideways look whenever I say SMET because people are like, you dummy, it's STEM. And I agree. SMET stands for Science, Math, and Educational Technology. And it's distinct from STEM for the reason of integration, where STEM implies, and guys, don't quote me on this, but STEM implies an integration of the fields that SMET does not. Like SMET is talking about science as one branch, math as another, and educational technology as another branch, to my understanding. Whereas STEM as like a big overarching umbrella term refers to all of these quant quant kind of based disciplines that are integrated into each other. That was the explanation that I was given, and that is also like the retelling of the explanation I was given. So it's not perfect, but there is a distinction. But the bottom line is that I'm a SMET student in the education department. And when I entered the program in the fall of 22, I was one of two SMET students, and the other SMET student is a part-time student who is a full-time teacher, has two daughters, is just not able to, is not a full-time student, and is not as present on campus or in other things that would be going on in the department, like signing on to other research projects, as full-time students are. So I wasn't able to form a close kind of class
Yeah, there's no
base.
cohorts. Yeah, you
Exactly.
didn't have a SMET cohort, you know.
Exactly. I didn't have a SMET cohort, but there was a cohort of SPED students, special education students, who three students, Andrea, Hannah, and Letitia, and I always say this for like to describe mentorship. I shoved my head under their wing, or I just kind of like forced myself into their group. And it really came as a result of us having two of our first three classes together.
Okay,
And
because I know you definitely
specifically,
had Tim FC's class.
yeah,
The first guest I interviewed, Amy, we were in Tim FC's class
yeah.
together, and it's so if you listen to Amy's episode, you definitely understand the community building that takes place in that class. So that makes perfect
Oh,
sense.
yeah, exactly. And then we also, I always think it's funny that like I remember it was the first class I had in this program. It was on a Monday, and it was with Dr. Bailey, and it was
Research
with,
methods?
yes, yeah.
Yes. So I'm taking that this coming semester. And
Yeah.
so you and I have had the conversation of like, is it better to have done research methods first or
Yeah,
quant and qual first? And so,
I'll be very interested to hear your experience because I had it my first class before I had any other class, and I think it was useful, but I'm going to be interested to hear your perspective because I think it'll be very like summative, like very, here is the bigger picture and how it kind of fits into other parts of research.
mhm,
Whereas what I was getting was like, okay, here is the breadth. Then in your methods classes, you'll go into depth kind of
mhm.
thing. So I'm going to be interested to hear your perspective on it. But that was, I enjoyed that as the first class, and that was the first class I had with Dr. Bailey. Um,
And she's
and
your advisor, or is
yeah,
it Tim?
she's one of my committee members.
Okay.
And for, I had her for at least two classes every semester. And I say two classes because one semester I had like literally six different professors. Like they rotated in and out. It was kind of a crazy class. But
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I had
Mhm.
Dr. Bailey every single semester I took classes, and therefore she's just so like aware of how my thinking has changed in a very helpful way for someone to be on my committee. So it's been
Awesome.
really great. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm super excited. Yeah, the so last week's episode I interviewed my friend Kizzy. Her and I have never met in person, but we worked on a study together with Dr. Johnson.
got
And
it.
so the manuscript has been submitted. We're waiting to hear, in the next couple months for hopefully our
Love that.
publication. But we will have her Dr. Bailey's class together. And so Kizzy has not taken qual or quant yet.
So
And
she's going to be
so
me in
exactly. And
with you.
so
Okay, I'll be
I'll be
so interested to
interested.
hear. Yeah,
So we'll all have to get together and have a conversation. I mean, I think I just love like this is where my life is headed is like these super nerdy conversations and I'm totally here for it.
definitely.
Um so speaking of nerdy conversations,
Yeah.
so which do we want to talk about first? Do we want to talk about wedding planning and all of that you're doing as a student, or do we want to talk about our summer doing comps?
It's your call. I can do either one. I can talk a lot about both. So,
Let's we'll switch gears for a hot minute and
okay.
go back to my hospitality roots, go back to
Love
my
it.
my venue specialist roots. So Katherine, over these last couple of years that we've had classes together, you got engaged.
Yay.
And so kind of tell me about like your like wedding planning process because I know you guys have done a small ceremony, so you are now officially married, but you're
Yep.
doing the bigger party later on. So
Yeah.
kind of like what is and on top of all of this, your husband was also getting his master's degree over these last
Yeah.
couple of years. So
Yeah.
kind of what has all of that been like?
Yeah. So it was funny. Before we got engaged, at this point, we have, in November, we will have been together for 9 years. So when we got engaged, we were in like year seven of our relationship. So, yeah, in like year seven of our relationship. So, as I don't know, American girl in her mid 20s in a long-term relationship that we saw ending in marriage, I was getting antsy and I was like, hey, we should like get engaged, especially because we'd also started going to friends' weddings and I was like, dude, let's get working on this. Like, let's go. And to your point about him also being a student, he entered his master's program the same semester I entered my program. Actually, it was after I got into my program that he was like, "Hey, we've been talking about me going back to school. I think I should do that." And I was like, "Oh, great idea. We'll both be in school at the same time, being really stressed out and having a great time." So we did that. It worked out really well, and he was a trooper. He did like night classes. Like the way the program was set up was he was able to do night classes, so he was able to keep working, which was so great because as a graduate student, you just don't make a lot of money. I
Mm-mm,
really like it, but it's not you don't do it for the money.
mm-mm.
So that's been really good. But whenever we would have conversations about marriage and engagement, he would be like, "Let me get through at least my first year." And I was like, "Okay, I can wait. That's fine." So we had been doing like semester trips to DC like after.
Because you met an undergraduate at GW, right? George
Yes, yeah.
Washington.
Yeah, we met in undergrad and then so in the spring of his
First
first year,
year?
at the end
Mm-hmm.
of our first year, we got engaged in DC. We went back to the restaurant we had our first date at. It was very, very cute. He threw a surprise engagement party. It was a lot of fun. He did a great job. And then when we were calling our family, his aunt, like the first question she asked was, "Tell me when the wedding is." And we were like, "We literally just got engaged like 90 minutes ago, but thank you we will let you know."
Every family does this.
Every family does it. And we were fine with it. Like it was fine. We just needed like more than 90 minutes to think about it. And one thing Colin was very clear on was he was like, I just want to finish my master's before we have the wedding. Like I just want to have one thing done so we're not just both having multiple things on our plate. And that's totally fair. So we're having our party. I keep calling it a party. We're having the party
It is. It's a
September
love
15th.
party.
Yeah, it's a party. It'll be a lot of fun on September 15th. And we had been having a pretty good time wedding planning pretty early on. Well, we got advice from friends like at the engagement party that like the first thing you should do is hire a wedding planner. And I was kind of hesitant towards that just because like I just saw that as like another expense.
But
But then
MG's advice would have been get the venue first to
so
see if you need a wedding planner or not. But
so
nobody listens to me.
that is great advice, and I should have talked to you. To be fair, just in my defense, I don't think we talked about it, so I don't think I was able to receive that advice ahead of time, but in hindsight, um current Catherine would have wanted past Catherine to have gotten that advice because ultimately bottom line we got a wedding planner who we absolutely adore. We're so excited to be working with her. And from what Colin and I both remember, we talked with our venue. When we toured the venue, we were told that they have a what day of coordinator that you have to
Hmm.
hire, which to my understanding is very standard and like is fine. But I'd also heard that like, and maybe if I had talked to you, the venue finder, I would have been more aware of kind of the conditions that come with this. I had been told that been I've been told that even if there's a day of coordinator for the venue, usually that person is there for the venue. They're not
Yes.
fully there for you, right? So it's
Yes.
like it's still good to bring your own person.
Yes.
And
This
by
is all
that point,
correct.
right, yeah, so by that point, we had hired our coordinator. We loved working with her. She just helped put us at ease, which was so helpful. And so we asked them, we were like, hey, like we're obviously more than happy to work with your person because we really liked our venue and we still like our venue, asterisk. But we just said to them, we were like, we're happy to have your wedding planner, but like we also have one. Like, would that be a problem? And they said no. We didn't ask follow up, but they also didn't ask follow up. Fast forward to a year later, this June, so just a couple months ago, I'm emailing with the vendor or with our venue, and the venue up until that point, we'd really only received bulk emails from them, like hi couples, like
So very like
nothing
templates, like they're just like cutting and pasting and emailing. Okay.
so template. And we had been told that all of our planning and organizing with the venue would be happening literally the month before the wedding. So up until that point, all of our other planning that has to be done for a wedding prior to a month before, we were doing with our coordinator because we had our coordinator. So we're doing all that, everything's going great, and then we get this email. We have this email exchange with our venue where we are told in very very certain terms and in our opinion, mine especially, very rude terms, that we were in no way, shape, or form allowed to have our own wedding coordinator be there on our day at the venue. And it was a very aggressive email, which MG, I can show you later if you want to see it.
No, I was
Um,
gonna say, like, I'm definitely happy to take a look at this and give you my professional opinion.
I would definitely love
Because
a professional opinion because, like, there's obviously emotions on my part on it, and I'm like, am I like being crazy?
I
But
think as long as there's an understanding that like both can be there, because my wedding planner friend, she would hire me on as kind of like a day of person where I would just come in and work for a couple hours because there are certain venues that actually require the opposite. Like there's certain venues that say like you have to have like a minimum of three wedding planners like on site that day just because there are so many like logistics or this, that, or the other. But that's very unorthodox for a venue to say that you can't have your own in addition to the person that they have on site, unless there was like a confusion of they thought that you were hiring, because there's some venues that like it's like this is our preferred list, and like you can
hmm
only hire a wedding coordinator that's on this list. But
hmm
if you already had an agreed upon price and you already had, yeah, I'll definitely take a look at this after we record because I am very curious as to, if and especially if you have everything in writing. Because
Yeah.
when with our wedding venue that, from 9 years ago, there's a lot of difficulty and a lot of back and forth. And the woman in charge of the venue like would kind of go back and renege. And it's like, no, per your email from May 9th, like you said this was okay. So like as long as you kind of have everything in writing and have this confirmation. So yeah, I'm definitely happy to put the
And
old hospitality hat back on and kind of help you sift through this, or at the very least try and like come to some sort of resolution, because that does sound like that's very frustrating.
yeah, and so at this point we're kind of rolling with the punches with them and we really just have all the intention of the world of writing a very factual but very factual and honest review of them at the end of all of this. Like we're
Mm.
kind of just going with the punches with them because they honestly just do keep pulling this kind of thing with us, which is unfortunate, but we're like, you know what? There's not much we don't want to put more effort into fighting them on it, so we're just kind of going with it. But, and unfortunately, we didn't get in writing that we were going to bring our own coordinator and that that would be okay with them. But whatever. The funniest thing is, and I think you're going to get a kick out of this, is, and this is like dark irony, not like haha irony, but one thing that got us is, so we found out in June in very rude terms that we couldn't have our own coordinator. And then at the beginning of August, we got this email, another bulk email that was saying, "Hi, September brides and couples. We're so excited to have our wedding. We're so excited to have your wedding. We're so excited to start planning with you a month before your wedding, blah, 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 all this stuff." And we find out in this email that, to your point, because there is a lot of day of logistics, because it's a venue that houses the ceremony and the reception and is just the all-in-one place, that if you are to bring more than 2 boxes of personal decor and things to your wedding, then you need to designate a position person from your guest list and have them sign a form that says that they will be in charge of setting up and taking down your personally brought decor.
Which are things that a wedding planner usually handle.
That y- y- exactly. And so I send this to Colin in all caps with like just saying like, can you believe it? So we are very frustrated, but this is our way of getting our coordinator there. We're having her as our guest. We're not using the term wedding coordinator, but she will be there doing things she would have been doing as our wedding coordinator.
That is absolutely brilliant. And I am in full support of that
Like that's the way we're, yeah.
and it
Yeah.
totally makes sense because she knows she's not technically a guest. She knows what she's doing. Um, and on top of that, like, you'd be feeding her a meal anyway because you feed, your vendors meals and such. So I think that's a brilliant way to handle the situation.
Yeah.
Seems strange though.
It's so it is just like that kind of like hypocrisy is a strong term, but it's just like that kind of thing where it's like you can't have this and call it this, but you can't have a wedding coordinator and have them be called a wedding coordinator, but you can have a guest who happens to be a wedding coordinator and you have to have them sign a form and do all of these things that they would have done in their professional capacity anyway. So it's very bizarre. But and one thing that I made a joke of when we first heard that our wedding planner wouldn't be able to be with us on our day was I was like, she's just kind of like my emotional support wedding planner at this point. Like, can I just have her there to like just reassure me that like things are going well, or, whatever, just because like we had built this relationship over the past year. And then when we get into our month of meeting, she just dove right into the meeting, didn't ask us anything about ourselves, which like whatever, like you don't need to be like our best friend, but there's just no
It
there
doesn't sound
was
like any personalization whatsoever.
no personalization, just like no interest, which is frustrating mainly because, and in hindsight, we understand that there were a lot of red flags with the venue that we didn't realize were red flags until they just became like Texas-sized flags for us, in the color red. But we did get a vendor list from them, and we've truly loved every single vendor other than them that we got recommended from our venue. So we're so thankful for all of them. They've all been so helpful. But from every single other vendor, we've just heard, the owners are so accommodating, they're so nice, they're so friendly. And I'm like, that has not been the experience we have had in any way, shape, or form. I'm glad you are putting on a great service and you're very helpful and everything, but you might want to check who you're associated with because these people are not giving the service they are promoting themselves as giving.
Oh, that's so frustrating.
Yeah,
Well, I am very relieved to hear you found a wedding planner that you have gelled so well with
so
that
well.
able to like help you kind of navigate this insanity. And it does sound like there is a very peaceful resolution at
Yeah.
the end of this. So I hope, and I tell you what, she could still have also like a great time as a guest too, because the last thing I did as MG the venue specialist was I worked my friend's block party wedding as her day of wedding coordinator, and it was one of the most fun weddings I've ever been to, and I was
Yeah.
working it.
Yeah, that's kind of my hope. I'm kind of like, okay, I hope you have a good time at this wedding because it's a lunchtime wedding. I know our coordinator had said that she's like, oh, it's been forever since I worked a lunch wedding. So I'm hoping like it'll be a fun experience for her. Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
Well,
Um, well, I wish you nothing but the best, and I look
thank
forward to hearing
you.
about it.
Yeah.
After y'all get now, are we doing a honeymoon?
We're
Um,
gonna do a mini moon. So
okay.
we got married in November, which was on our like actual dating anniversary, which we thought was very cute. But our wedding or sorry, our dating anniversary and our legal wedding anniversary now always falls over like the Thanksgiving break, which Temple, to my knowledge, is still giving us as our fall break. I know they sent out that poll
They
last
are.
year.
Yeah, I guess we are still getting the entire week of Thanksgiving off. Nothing's changing.
Praise. Because when they sent out the survey, I was like, if anyone says anything other than giving us the full week off at Thanksgiving, they're crazy because that is such a it's just so nice for everyone to know that you have that entire week.
Oh,
Um, I think.
I this is my personal take on it was it's so bizarre that you're like in classes for like 12 weeks.
That is
You
true.
have one full week off, 2 weeks of classes, final semester's over, and you're off for a month. So I feel like the
Yeah.
timing is odd.
Hmm.
And so so we have been taking, so for the last 2 years, we've taken that entire week and like flown somewhere for vacation.
Yeah.
I voted to do like have like a longer like 5 weekend break in mid-October
Like Indigenous Peoples Day. Yeah.
and then just have like a normal Thanksgiving break.
Hmm.
Um, but it's kind of like, I think also we have unorthodox schedules anyway. So like if you want to take a week off, like you could take a week off. But
Yeah. No,
but
and it's funny. I think my enjoyment of that break really just is a carryover from being an undergrad and just thinking like, okay, we usually Wednesday classes are always canceled, but like some teachers cancel their Monday class, some teachers cancel their Tuesday class. So it's like that unknown, and like they usually don't tell you until like it's too late to buy a ticket home or whatever. So I think it's just nice to like know that you have that entire week. You can like I always like to do a thing where like I still leave on Monday, Tuesday, but like I give myself that first weekend of Thanksgiving to like just do my own thing, which is nice. But I definitely get your point that like that last 2 weeks of the semester is always a very like speed run event,
mm,
which is very stressful. But anyway, so we're probably gonna do like a little mini moon, um, the first weekend of Thanksgiving weekend. We're still trying to plan that. If you have any suggestions, let us know.
hmm. I guess I have to think about it because it's maybe something like because it's hard to tell like what the weather's going to be like that
I
time.
know, I know.
Because even I feel like we've always had a great time in Baltimore. We had a lot of fun in Pittsburgh earlier this
Yeah.
summer. But if it's winter time, like, do you want to, would you want to do like Colonial Williamsburg? Like,
Yeah.
so I think it just depends on, or do you just want to go like down the shore for like a couple days or something?
Yeah, exactly.
Um, so it's tough if you're doing something that's like in driving distance, like for just a couple of days.
Yeah.
Um, but like, the Finger Lakes or, the Hudson River Valley, something like that could be really
Yeah.
nice. Um, but yeah,
Yeah. We're excited.
it'll be great. It'll be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything's gonna be just fine. So
Yeah. Yeah.
speaking of
Yeah.
everything being just fine, okay, so you survived all of your coursework.
I did.
And earlier this
Did.
summer, you started your comprehensive exams
I
that we refer
did.
to as comps.
Hmm.
And so once you finish your comps, that's when you can start your dissertation proposal. So everybody has depending on whatever your concentration is going to define what your comps look like.
Which is weird,
So
but
so as a SMET person, what were your comps like and what has this summer been like? And you're all congratulations. I know you're all done
thank
with them.
you. Yes,
So
thank you.
that's huge. So
Yeah.
tell us about the comps.
Yeah, yeah, so first of all, I think it's very odd that all of the programs have different um comp standards, specifically within education. So like there's the education PhD, which is what I'm doing, but that's also like what the sped gals are doing. And then the education PhD also houses like a couple of other concentrations, but we still have all different comps, which I just think is odd. But whatever. I was very happy with my what my comps were. My comps were kind of like 20% portfolio where I had like a teaching statement, I had my CV, I had a couple other like just like what you would submit to get hired, like in academia kind of thing, which is helpful for me because I kind of put all those kinds of things together when I was applying to programs and when I was applying for actual teaching jobs when I wasn't sure if I would get into an ed program. But I hadn't updated them since I had more teaching experience, since I had more theory, since I had research experience. And so like I hadn't like been all I hadn't given it the flourish that maybe an ed student could now that she finished her coursework. So it was nice to be able to do all of that. And then the big part of my comps were a lit review, which was 30 to 40 pages. And the nice thing about it is that it is formatted as the way it was presented to me is that it's kind of like a like 30% working draft of your proposal. Like you can start kind of like integrating your lit review into your proposal, which is just like you all heard my educational background. Like I want to be done. This is like my seventh year in grad school. I have made some money in my 20s, but very little money in my 20s. So I want to get out of here. I am ready. I've loved my experience, don't get me wrong, but I am ready to get out. So anything I can do to like double up on like credits or experiences or future projects, I'm doing it. So I'm so glad that I'm going to be able to use like the stuff I have from my comps in my proposal. Um, but yeah, I got the prompt in I got the prompt in June and I was told that I'd have a month. I didn't realize that that month was like the quote unquote month was like starting whenever you got the prompt until your decided upon date. Like I didn't realize that the month could just be like a bit more of like just the broader summer schedule. Because I had in my head that I was going to start July 1st, turn in August 1st, and that was going to be my month. But I got the prompt in like early June, and I'm not going to lie, guys, not the best decision. It worked out fine. Like it did work out fine, but I was like, I was planning on starting July 1st and I'm going to start July 1st. So I like really just like finish up other projects in June. I had a couple of trips that I took. So like I kind of did a couple different things and then I really sat down, started cranking out my comps in July. It worked out really well. I also when I make the joke that I'm like a professional student at this point, I do think it's warranted in a way because like I know how I work, I know how I write, I know a lot about myself as a student, which I think is just so helpful. So like I knew I could do this in a month. I wasn't worried about it. I knew kind of like what timeline I needed. I also am very thankful to be a pretty effective self-regulated learner, which is really important in grad school, especially in like this latter half of the program where all of it's self-regulated. Like you don't have courses, you don't really have any specific timetables. It's just up to you. But thankfully that is a skill that I have for myself. So yeah, I really just worked on that in July. I think I mentioned this off mic before the interview started, but I actually got back into crafting at the same time. Because what better time than your comprehensive exams than picking up new hobbies that take your focus away from what you're supposed to be doing.
What do you mean
Um,
by crafting? Like what are you making?
I I started following this content creator, which I probably should credit her because she's great. It's like Brittany Art or something. It's awesome. She has a full-time job and like content creation is just like her hobby. And she says it. She's just like, content creation doesn't have to be your job. It can just be another outlet for your like creativity and just like showing other people what you're doing. But she says it herself. She's like, I just do whatever crafting I want. And I've really been trying to like take that energy. So like I've been doing a lot of hand sewing, embroidery, but I've been doing some like drawing, a little bit of digital art, just kind of all different stuff. And I kind of like that because specifically with the like hand sewing and drawing art and everything, it like just gets my eyes off my screen. Like I am like hyper focusing on what I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing in my hand, but like it just gives me something that's not like me like staring at blue light for like 8 hours straight. Not eight
Yeah.
hours straight, but I also started volunteering at Fab Scrap and Bach Building, which has been really nice. Colin calls it my manual labor time, but it's a volunteer space where you help really the sustainable nonprofit organization that takes fashion material, fabric material, and upcycles it either into like greatly discounted like crafting supplies, like fabric supplies, or gets repurposed into another term that I'm forgetting. Sade, I think it's called. No, that's an artist. I don't know. I don't know. It's called something, but it's used for like insulation. It's like made for
Oh, okay.
it's remade into something else. So it's repurposing, but it's volunteering, which I like to do, but it also gets my eyes off my screen. But so I've been getting a lot of free fabric from that, which has been really nice. So just doing a lot of different stuff.
Are you able
Um,
to donate pillows to that organization?
that's such a good question. I don't know, but there's actually another, I don't know. Bottom line, I don't know.
Just curious.
Yeah,
That's what I'm trying to figure out. It's like I feel like I know of an outlet of where to donate stuff to. Even Paws, I just dropped off a bunch of towels and linens
nice.
at Paws last week. So okay, just curious.
Yeah,
Well, that's also that you have this like creative outlet and doing something humanitarian to try and like
a
break
little
up the
bit. Yeah.
monotony of writing and
Yeah.
researching. And so it sounds like that is absolutely an excellent form of self-care, that like you know yourself
Yeah.
well enough to like be able to like balance your time. So comps are done. So what is
Yeah.
your dissertation topic all about?
Yeah, so my area of focus within math is developmental math. So that's like when college students get to college and they, for whatever reason, usually through no fault of their own, do not have the knowledge needed to, or the skills needed to really excel in college level coursework. And that college level coursework is like kind of a depending on the institution term, but like they wouldn't be able to hop into the calculus sequence and succeed. So they need help specifically with algebra, which is like equations, graphing lines, factoring, a lot of topics that you typically cover in middle and high school, and they just never gained proficiency with that to the college level. So it's a field of study that's been around for, or a discipline within mathematics education that's been around for about 50 years, according to my literature review. About 50 years. And research, or sorry, it's the field of developmental math has been around for like a very long time, but in its current form and research on developmental math has really only been in the last 50 years. And the field is relatively emergent in the sense of kind of really focusing on how to help students and how to not just think of them as kids who need to be funneled out of the math pathway or pushed through the math pathway, but like really help to be successful students. So that's kind of what I'm trying to focus on in my dissertation. I will say it's really nice to be in a field that is emergent and relatively understudied, because there's really just a lot of places you can go with it. It makes the literature review part of things a little difficult, but I guess it's all just to say, like, I'm not really sure exactly where I'm going to go with it. I do see myself bringing motivation theory into my dissertation, but really just trying to focus on students' affect, emotions, behaviors, relationship with math, since like I'd say like 9 out of 10 students in those courses come to the class like really not liking math, really being averse to math, just not really enjoying the classes, which I get. Like as a quote unquote math person, which is a term I hate because like I really do believe that everyone can do math. Everyone can and should do math, and like they have the potential to, and they should have people who believe they can. And unfortunately, that's not the case. But these students just have, again, I think just have had really bad experiences that have culminated in them not having math proficiency. But I don't think that should really dictate the opportunities that they have. But unfortunately, because it's college, which is where like where at least the way we frame it, like college is where you choose your career, which is not true. Like you can do whatever you
Hmm.
want with your college degree. You cannot do what your college degree is. Like just because I did math and have followed a very, like if you look at my resume like reads what I've always wanted to do. Like it's very linear. It makes a lot of
Meanwhile,
sense.
mine is the complete like
And
insane.
And like that's
all over
how
the
it should
map.
be. Like you should be able to do whatever you want. You should be able to change whatever you want. Like that's what Colin always told me when I was in the math program. He was like, especially once he realized I was like really not having a good time in the program, just it wasn't a good fit for me personally. He was just like, you can always like off ramp. Like you can always just not be doing what you're doing. And like I think that's what students should be doing, or that's the opportunity students should have. But just given our current system, like we just very much view it as what you do in college is what you're going to do for the rest of your life, or at least is what's going to set you up to do what you're going to do for the rest of your life. Um, but because of that mentality, students who can't do, quote unquote, can't do math and are in developmental classes, like they often get funneled out of their STEM majors because they can't pass these courses. And like the literature says that the issues in developmental education are having like ramification in STEM fields, like in the professions of like partially contributing to why the STEM fields have fewer people going into them and why there are like staffing issues and things like that. And it's like that's a big statement. But I mean, I do think on a very local level, like I've had so many students come to me and be like, yeah, like just the other day I dropped my STEM major. I'm being a poli-sci, like I'm doing poli-sci now. And like if you want to do poli-sci, that's great. That's like what my husband does. Like I love that for you. Like that's a needed field. Like that's great. But like poli sci and STEM are two totally different things. And like if you wanted to go be an engineer and then you're being told you can't because you can't pass this math course, like that's a big deal for these students, like on a very local level. So it's really I want to do a very student focused kind of dissertation. The form it's going to take is unclear, but I'm excited about it.
Or do you think it'll be a mixed method study, or do you think it'll
Oh
be
no.
all quant, all quant all day?
I think so. Quant is I I whenever I do quant, just because like I don't know, in my mind, like the way my brain works, there's so much overlap between stat and math, but like if I ever don't use stats for like quite literally even a week, like I forget everything I know about stat and like I have to go back and like relearn like all the tests and how to do everything and like what the conditions are and everything like that. So it's like I but that's but with that said, like I do have a very strong base in stats. So like doing a stat study in my dissertation would be methodologically like on the easier side. So I am playing with that. But in developmental math education or in developmental math research, there's like the field is oversaturated in quant literature, so there's not that much of a need for it. But if I ask the right question, I could do a quant study. I actually did a mixed method study in the spring, and like I was really certain about my methodology. Dr. Bailey was the teacher for that course, and like she really helped us like nail down our procedure, our process, and like learn how to do a mixed method study. But I'm never gonna do one of those again. It's just too much work. It's too much work. It like it's not only like too much work, like I'm not averse to too much work, but it's just like you have to like you have to like be able to like look into the future for those and like keep track of things like for months. And it's just like not something I want to do for my dissertation, which is already going to be stressful enough.
Hmm.
So I'd love to do a quant study and then like two qual studies because I have been told that like I should do a three study dissertation, which is like,
Interesting. Okay.
yeah, that is definitely like a newer thing.
Hey
In
man, if that's what your committee is telling you what to do,
yeah,
like,
I need to get done. And if my dissertation says to go learn how to skydive, I will go learn how to skydive. Like I just want to be done. So like if I'm not do if I so like if I am doing a three study dissertation, I will do a three study dissertation and I'm totally fine with that. But I definitely one of them is not going to be mixed methods. That's just too much. But I would love to do one quant, two qual. That'd be
Heard.
great.
All right. So we want to be done. Once we're Dr. Burke, what's next?
I would love to teach developmental math somewhere. I my goal has always been to teach, and that is still very much what I want to do. I want to get back into the classroom. I love working with developmental math students. Like I like my belief that all students have the potential to do math. Like I really try to infuse that into my teaching, and I think one thing that really keeps me motivated, focused, whatever word you want to use. Like one thing I really enjoy about teaching developmental math is like because I have this perspective on students and because these students have such a bad relationship with math, I'm like, no, I want you, if this is your last experience you're going to have with math, like I don't want it to be a bad one. Like I want you to leave this classroom like at least not having a bad experience. Like I realize that I'm maybe not going to convince you that you can do math, but like I don't want your last experience with math to be where you dropped your STEM major for a liberal arts major. I don't want you to be like, wow, that really sucked. I can't do math and like I'll never be able to do math and like there are such things as not math people. Like I want you to at least believe like, hey, like I
Gotta
may
get
not have
that
done
growth
great.
mindset going.
Yeah,
If we
like
could,
and it's
if
you
we
know
could
so
get Lindsay through the second half of Quant 2, I mean,
true.
that was a slog to try and
Yeah.
help our friend who hates math, never wants to use quantitative methods. It's not her wheelhouse. And
Yeah.
that was so difficult, but we learned about growth mindset
Yeah.
and motivation education. And she finally about halfway through the semester of Quant 2 was like, oh, I'm understanding this. I can do this. And I'm like, wait.
Exactly. Like I just want to leave students with like one positive experience. Because one thing when I was like when I've since decided I'm doing higher ed, like teaching in higher ed. But when I was like in college and like still like could change trajectory, my mom was like, Catherine, like you're a good teacher. Like you should really like teach at like in elementary, middle, or high school, like where you can like quote unquote really make a difference. And I definitely get that. But I'm like, Mom, there's like no one in higher ed who like really has a growth mindset for these students, like believes in that. Like that's just like not how the field typically is. Like, and even in the motivation class, MG, like you heard me talk about this so much, but it's like unfortunately, like the way college is set up, and like I could talk more about this and I won't, but like the way college is set up, like it's not accommodating to a lot of these like student focused things that we know would help them, like growth mindset, working on their math relationship, like helping them build intrinsic motivation. Like there's not room for that there. And so I see me being a teacher in higher ed as just like a space that needs to be filled, just someone who comes into the classroom and is like, guys, like, even if you don't think you can, like, you guys can learn this. Like, just having faith in students, I think, is so important. And that's what I want to bring to higher ed education
I
is
love
kind of
it.
that belief.
I
Yeah.
love it. Yeah, it was funny. I was in DC this past weekend, and my cousin's husband is a chemistry professor at GW. So it was
Yes.
exciting to finally kind of like nerd out with him and talk the academy for a little while.
Yeah.
And he's like, "What's your favorite motivational theory?" And I'm like, uh but it's like I could talk about the work that I've done, and I was like, I've done some like interesting stuff with utility value, and not to get too meta, but doing a study on interest and being interested in a particular subject and this whole
Yeah.
interest theory. So I think that there's just 9 million different facets, and I'm in the same kind of boat as you in terms of like I know like a general kind of idea because that's why I picked educational psychology. But as far
Yeah.
as like that research question I'm going to ask, like time will tell. So,
Yeah.
um, well, Catherine, the last question that I have for you today is what is your favorite venue? It's a throwback to season 1 and season 2. Name of the podcast, Beyond the Venue. So, do you have a particular favorite venue? I know probably your not your least favorite venue, but it will be a
Yeah.
very special venue to you as far as,
Yes.
getting to have your wedding there. So
Yes.
it's not a dislike for the venue per se, but more of a dislike for the way that their administration could go a little
Exactly.
smoother.
Yeah, so far it's very much just to clarify, like if this makes the pod. We've had a very nice experience with like literally everyone else involved except for the owners of this venue, which who
Okay.
unfortunately run a lot of the business. Like they are the month before wedding coordinator. They're the person who like you can send an email to anytime to get an answer from. And like they just always kick the ball to the month before meeting. And like that month before meeting was not that helpful. So the owners unfortunately are not great, but like everyone else we've been involved with has been really great. Their vendors have been great. And like their venue is annoyingly beautiful. Like it is a beautiful venue that has so much to offer. And I'm like, God, why are you such like crap people? Like it's really annoying. But everything else we love about it. The day will be great. That's all that matters. Also we're already married, so like in some way it's like whatever. But honestly, I saw that when I saw this question, I was like, oh my God, I don't have an answer for this. Because one thing Colin and I always talk about, and like one thing I one thing I really appreciate about Colin is like he usually teaches me like words for things I didn't know had a word. And one
Mm.
word that he taught me, not recently, but one that like really just like blew my mind was third space. So like something that's like the place that is not your home and that is not your work. It's like a third space. And so the example he gave is that typically teenagers don't have a great third space. They have home and they have school. They don't really have a defined third space where they can go. Like
Unless you're like a
maybe
student
for,
athlete or something and like have like
yeah,
an activity.
exactly. And it's like I guess maybe a lot of kids or like teenagers third space might be like the mall. Like so when you see like hordes of teenagers walking around, it's like, oh, that's annoying that they're there, but it's like that's literally the only other place they have to go besides their home or their school. So it's like third space is just an interesting concept to me. And I really would love like a third space. I don't really have one. I don't like studying in public. Like I just like I don't part of it is I don't this is very broad. I don't like beverages. Like I don't like coffee. I don't like tea, which I know sounds irrelevant. You're like, where is she going with this? But like I don't like coffee
But
shops. Like I
working at a
don't
coffee shop is not your
yeah, like
jam.
I don't like
Yeah.
coffee shops. Like I can go and like get a tea, but I'm like this tea was $4 and like I'm happy I contributed to the local economy, but like I could just do this at home. The bottom line of all of this, honestly, is like my favorite venue is my apartment. Like I love my home. I am very much a house cat. I actually, when I first moved to Philly, when I was in the Temple Mount department, which like I still don't really know how I swung this like rent wise, but I actually lived in Rittenhouse and I loved living in Rittenhouse. I had a studio. I had my own little space. I absolutely loved it. Very expensive, but I managed it somehow. And the somehow is I never went out. I never did anything. And I really just enjoyed the space I was paying rent for, which like I know it sounds silly, but like I really do love my space. Like I love the apartment we have now that I share with my husband. Like it's we're very lucky. It's in South Philly, so it has 2 stories. Our rent is very affordable, but like I really just love the space I've created here. And I like being in my home. I'm very much a homebody. Like I think like for instance, I know I'm very fortunate to have a loving partner and not never have like issues of safety or anything like that during the pandemic, but like I had zero issues during the lockdown. I was like, I can't leave my house. Great. That's like my natural state. Like I love my home. So that's like my favorite venue. It's my
Yeah, I
home.
think yeah, I'm sure there are a lot of introverts that probably felt very similarly. So no,
Yeah.
I think that's a great answer because it's a very personal
Yeah.
answer. And so
All my
whatever.
stuff's here. Like come on. What don't you love about that?
Awesome. Well, I hope that you do get a chance to maybe like go outside and get some fresh air throughout breaks throughout your dissertation
Yeah.
writing process that you'll be experiencing over the next couple of years. And definitely wish you all the best with your upcoming wedding and your dissertation writing. And I'm excited to stay in touch throughout the semester. And I will definitely miss you in the classroom this
Yeah,
next
me
year.
too. Yeah.
But thanks so much again for taking the time to be on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode from the fourth and final season of Beyond the Venue podcast. New episodes of this final season will drop on Fridays throughout the fall semester. Follow Beyond the Venue podcast on Instagram for details and updates about each episode and stream all 4 seasons on your favorite podcast platform. Thanks so much for your support.